let's go now to, I want to talk to you about the human negativity bias. It's super important to know this about your mind. Super important to know how your mind is hardwired. I appreciate this, but a large part of what we do with mindfulness and meditation is we welcome everything that we experience, right? And not everything is wonderful. So we learn to welcome that stuff too. It's how we grow. This is how this practice really allows us the peace. But as we're going along and becoming more aware, as we're meditating and we're starting to see our thoughts coming through and noticing them and labeling them and trying to let them go, you might notice that there's a lot of negative thoughts. And it's kind of overwhelming, especially at first. It can be kind of depressing, right? But it's normal. It's 110% normal. We're biologically programmed to notice negative experiences, negative input, anything negative. We're biologically programmed to notice that 5 times more than positive things. This is part of our biology, and it's part of our and it's part of who we are, and it's not, when we'll go into this, it's not as useful now with modern life. So Rick Hansen, doctor, he's a neuropsychologist, he's an author. He studied the negativity bias for many years, because I think he was trying to understand why he's a meditator too. Why are we always obsessing over the bad stuff? You know, and a perfect example is, if I wasn't a meditator and someone didn't show up for my class, I'd be like, oh, why didn't they come? Did they not like this class? Instead of saying, wow, you know, this person is in my class and this person is in my class. Like, we immediately focus on what's wrong, right? So he studied this to try and understand why. And I want to point out here that, you know, some of us have been fortunate to learn to count our blessings, right? I'm fascinated by this because I wasn't taught this in any way, shape, or form. But some people, you know, their religion or their family culture has taught them to be grateful to God, or to express gratitude to others. And I call this sort of advanced human training. It's not a given. It's not the default. And like I said, I didn't get this training in my family. We were taught to be the smartest, the fastest, the most beautiful, you know. And that pursuit, you know, it has its benefits. But it has a big cost, right? Because you're spending your time scanning around for what's wrong, right? The inner flaws, the outer flaws, what needs to be improved, what needs to be fixed. So it's a foundation for a lot of unhappiness. So the human brain has been hardwired over millions of years to focus on the negative. So you have the amygdala, which is the primal brain. It's the core reptilian brain, wired to focus on these negative things. Now, we've developed additional layers, most notably the prefrontal cortex, right? The rational mind, and it tempers these primal urges, but the core is there, right? And when we're not aware, when we're not paying attention, that primal brain is just focusing us on the negative things. Why did we develop this way is makes a ton of sense. For most of our existence, which is about 6 million years, we've been hunter-gatherers. And these negative experiences have had a greater impact on our survival. Right? We can call it the carrot versus the stick. Like if our ancestors millions of years ago, if they missed a carrot, for instance, an opportunity to mate, an opportunity to get food, well, they could usually find another opportunity later to get that, right? But if they missed a negative input, if they missed a negative sign, if they missed a stick, for instance, ate a poisonous plant, were attacked by a mountain lion, accidentally walked over the edge of a cliff because they weren't paying attention, they would be killed. And there'd be no chance of carrots any time thereafter. So Rick Hansen explains this in his research with a great analogy, metaphor, and I'm going to share my screen. He coins it as follows. Let me share this. Okay. All right. So he coins it, your brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive experiences. Even though most of our experiences are neutral or positive. Most of our experiences are neutral or positive, but we're Velcro for the bad experiences and Teflon for the good experiences. The humans who survived the millennia, they paid all their attention to the bad things. And that's who we come from. So the big catch is that in our modern Western civilized world, it's a rare person who has to deal with dangerous animals and poisonous plants on a daily basis. We don't even spend our days hunting our food, unless you count going to the giant to hunt. Right? So we have this energy in us, and there's nowhere to direct it. And what happens is we end up taking whatever's there and focusing this instinctual negativity bias on whatever's in our experience. So what we have to do as modern humans is we have to actively balance the brain. This brain, it's a huge ball of Velcro for bad news. And if you don't know this, you can't work against it. So we have to cultivate the thoughts of abundance. You have to actively cultivate it, like you get your 10,000 steps. It's the same process. It's looking for a blue sky, a warm house in the winter, a friendly interaction with somebody, a good meal, attention to these things. How much we have to pay attention to these. How much work do we have? Well, researchers have found that for every negative thought, you need to cultivate 5 positive ones. It's a 5-to-1 ratio. So if you want to stay out of depression or despair or sort of that generalized, there's something wrong here feeling. So for every thought of something wrong in my life, I have to gather up 5 thoughts of what's going right in my world. And that's no matter how small or limited life has become at any time for any one of us. Right? And this applies to others too. I'm thinking as a mother, right? I mean, the instinct is to correct children, to prune the tree so it bears fruit. And yet, they too need 5 positive interactions for every 1 correction, so to speak. Which, of course, my mom didn't know this. Most of our parents wouldn't have known this. We didn't know this. I certainly didn't know this. And there's so much abundance if we look carefully, if we're mindful. We can walk. We can talk. We're in pain, we're sick, yes. And we can see a beautiful sunset maybe out the window. The world is dangerous, yes. And there's a spring bloom, there's a lilac blooming in my front yard. There's lunatics out with guns and young scared boys with guns on the streets, yes. And there's nourishing food in the refrigerator. We're alive. So this is our work. This is our work. We know the pain is there. We know the lunatics are out there. But we don't allow our minds to stay and to dwell there. We let it in, and then we let it go, and then we refocus on nourishing thoughts.